Hello, and welcome to the M42 Adventures podcast. I am your host, Rick Trimmer, and this is actually going to be a new segment that we're adding. It's going to be called Ask Me Anything. A buddy of mine, Ryan Mickler, on his podcast has been doing this for years, and I think it's a good thing to kind of throw out there and have people be able to ask questions that they want to have answered, and not just have me dictate what I want to talk about. So I stole this from Ryan. We're going to add it once a month. So if you have any questions, it can be about anything. That was the biggest question I got was, can it be about anything? A lot of people know my history with travel and finances and stuff like that. And so maybe there wasn't directly related to M42 Adventures, but any aspect, and anything's open. So I'm happy to answer them. This episode is going to be a little bit shorter, probably about 45 minutes. And I've got a list here of the questions that we compiled over the last 2 days from listeners and friends and whatnot. And we're just going to go through as many as we can. And so this is that episode. Let's get into them. Okay, so here's the questions. I had Ricky, my right-hand man, put these in onto a spreadsheet. Just got them here in front of me. In no particular order. I actually haven't even read any of them, so we're going to kind of go through this together for the first time. I have not read any of these, so there's a couple pages of questions. I'll get as far as I can. Okay, let's just jump right into it. The first question is, what's your favorite destination you've traveled to? So I get this one a lot. For those of you who are new to the podcast, I went traveling for the last 7 years, minus COVID, going on 8 now. We're still traveling, and been to just over 60 countries with my wife and 3 little boys. And this is probably the most common question that gets asked to me is, what's my favorite place? And it's a hard one to answer. It's one of those things where you want to say all of them or they're all great. But if I'm forced to answer the question, it would probably be Italy for me. The history, the food, the people, the scenery. I mean, it's just got it all. It's just got every aspect of it. It's got mountains, it's got beaches, just a really beautiful country. We spent months and months in Italy. I also kind of default to English speaking. Australia was beautiful. New Zealand was beautiful just because navigation, ordering, communication, all those things are easier when you speak the language. But yeah, if I had to answer, I always say top 5. These are my top 5. But my favorite destination is the question, and I would have to say Italy. If you haven't had a chance to get over there, go. There's just so much to that country that it is absolutely beautiful. Question number 2. Is Southern Utah where you see yourself for the rest of your life? So for those who don't know, I live here in St. George, Utah. We bought a 40-acre property near Zion that's amazing. It's got a cabin on it. I don't know, honestly. I never say never. One of the things that people know about me is I don't like repetition. I believe life is meant to be lived. And if you ate the same food every day and worked at the same job every day and drove the same road every day, to me, that always kind of feels like Groundhog Day and not what I'm interested in. I know a lot of people like that comfort and that security, but not me. I always tell my mom, if you ever know where I am for more than a couple days in a row, if you ever know that Rick is sitting in that chair 9 to 5 for years, then I'm doing something wrong. I like to keep people guessing, and I like to just go out there and explore. So yes, my base camp is Southern Utah. That's where my home is. But for the rest of my life, that's a big statement. I don't think so. I have ambitions. I'd like to buy a ranch in Texas. There's a lot of places that I would like to live and try, and long term. I don't think I'll ever be anywhere for the rest of my life. I think I'm going to move around. But that's how I feel now. We'll see if that changes. Question number 3. What's the best hunt you've ever been on? Best hunt I've ever been on. So again, these are loaded questions because they're all different. Every animal's different. Every location's different. Um, but if I had to narrow it down, it's probably, I'm going to be general here because it's not a specific hunt, but it's the Spike elk hunt here in Utah. I've been doing that since I was 14. I started with my grandpa up in northern Utah by Payson. Went up Spanish Fork Canyon and hunted elk for a few years, spike elk only, with a rifle, and had some beautiful memories doing that. And then we stopped for 10 years or so. Just kind of got out of it. He moved, and I didn't really realize they did that down here in southern Utah. And then we got talking 12 years ago. My first boy, Castle, was just born, and somehow it came up that there's a spike elk hunt down here in southern Utah. I just didn't realize that. Bought a tag, went to Fish Lake, ended up killing a spike the first year with my grandpa and my dad and my wife and my new son there. And we've been doing it every year since. I haven't missed one. I actually missed last year for the first time in 12 years because usually I can, get home for a couple weeks from our long-term travels. And last year we just could not make it happen. But for 12 years, we've been doing that hunt, and I have so many memories with family. It's kind of turned into a family reunion, not just a hunt. So everybody comes up, brothers, sisters, grandma and grandpa, my mom and dad. We rent a cabin, and it's got more of my memories with hunting that I cherish with my grandpa, who's now passed away, than any other hunt that I have. So that would be the best hunt that's the best hunt that I've ever been on. What are your top five books of all time? This one's difficult. I get asked this a lot as well, and I have my top five books. But my top five books might be, I know it's asking me what my top five books are. And I'll answer that, but my top five books, again, I'm very much into, finances, business, self-help, stuff like that. I used to send my brother books all the time. For years, I'd send him mailing books. And finally, 4 or 5 years into it, I says, hey, how did you like all the books I've sent? Probably close, I don't even know. 30 or 40 books I've sent him. And he says, honestly, I don't read them at all. I'm not interested in self-help and financial books and business books. He likes like fantasy. It's an escape for him to be able to go and read something that is more entertainment. And so top five books for me are going to be, the one that changed the course of my life is The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. I was in a pretty dark spot when that happened, when I first was given that book, broke, lost everything. And it was one of those books that when you got it, it was talking about how you can, get your businesses to run with 4 hours a week. And at the time I was working 80 to 90 and hadn't had a day off in years, literally years. And so it was just fathomable to me to get to that point. But I read it and I just started implementing it, and it took me years. And eventually I've gotten down to where I work 4 hours a month. If that, while we were traveling, I worked a couple hours a month, just checked on books and had couple phone calls and stuff. But I actually got it down to 4 hours a month. So that book changed the course of my life into thinking, I used to remember bragging to my dad saying, that I worked 80 hours this week, or I worked 90 hours this week. And that was kind of showing my value, was how much I worked. And I started realizing that, if you're working 80, 90 hours a week all the time, you're failing. You're literally failing. That's not how you should be running your life. And if you can't hire or delegate or get better systems to get down to a 40-hour work week and spend more time with your family, then you're failing. And that, in my eyes, you can do it for a month or two. Somebody quits, you get a big job. That's no problem. You got to do what you got to do. But for years, like I was, where I did 84 hours average a week for 3 years and thought that it was a badge of honor. And I look back now thinking, yeah, I had to do it. And I'm glad that I did. But at the same time, I'm glad that I was able to change that and get onto a path of, my mantra now is I don't work. I spend time with my family. We go on trips. And that is what I'm most proud of. So 4-Hour Work Week is a top one. Man's Search for Meaning is a great one. Anything by Dale Carnegie is a good one. Influence Friends. I can't remember the title offhand, but basically anything by Dale Carnegie, I absolutely eat up. It's how to win friends and influence people. That's a really, really good one. The 4 Quadrants is a good one for your relationships and your marriages. Again, I'm not very good at the authors, so you have to excuse that. But I look at books as cheat codes. I tell everybody that. Ricky's sitting here next to me. I got him reading books. A couple 6 years ago, and you've read hundreds of books now, right? And changed your life, right? And so I tell everybody, read books. One of the biggest things that people do after high school is they stop reading, stop educating themselves, which is crazy to me. For you to think that you know everything, especially from public school, is crazy. I get more out of reading books by far than I ever did in college or high school. So keep reading, find what you're interested in. If you're interested in, hiking, there's books written for hikers. If you're interested in starting a business, there's business books that are for starting a business. So read. You look at the main characteristics of most millionaires, and not one of them is they continue to educate and read. And that is paramount for me. I'm teaching my kids, my oldest son, he's 12. We actually have a thing in place where he reads a business book or a self-help book each month. And then I write a test for that book, 20 questions. And if he passes it with 80% or higher, he gets $50. And if he doesn't get the money. So that's what I do with my own boys. He's read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's one that comes to mind. That's a huge book that changed my life. Where you have the rich dad who, teaches his kid how to invest and how to, manage his money. And these are the key things. School teaches you math and reading and writing and history, which are all obviously important. But I think what elevates you into further success is books on real estate, books on, investing, books on how to manage your employees, how to start a business. These are the things that people have done before you, and they're cheat codes. You can go read Ray Dalio's life story in his autobiography and get, decades of experience and knowledge in a few hours or a few days, and to not take advantage of that is mind blowing to me. And yeah, every book, you're not going to read 400 pages of a book and get 400 pages of mind-blowing information. But you might get 10 pages, and those 10 pages can change, your trajectory just a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And pretty soon, after a couple of years of adjusting yourself, you're going to be better off. The other thing too that I think a lot of people miss is they just read books. They listen to podcasts. They go to seminars. You have to do what the book says. If you read a book on how to lose weight, reading the book is not going to make you lose weight. You have to implement what you learn in the book. If you want to start a business and read a book on starting a business, the business isn't just going to appear. You have to go do the work. You have to apply what you learn and then continue to grow, because you're not going to get it all right and you're not going to figure it out. I haven't. And that's why I continue to read to this day. And so, yeah, those are my top 5 books. Okay. Next question, biggest regret in life and biggest success. Biggest regret. I'm kind of one of those guys, and I know this is kind of a cliche, but I'm one of those guys who I don't really have regrets. There's things that I probably would have done differently or something, I guess, if that's maybe technically a regret. But at the same time, I am who I am from the things I've done. It's like if you said to a cake, don't be chocolate, it's like, that's how, with those ingredients, that's how you make the chocolate cake. If you take out the, whatever the nibs or whatever it is, that makes your, the chocolate flavoring, then it's not chocolate anymore, And so that's kind of how I look at life. It's like, I'm all these ingredients. I'm, thousands of ingredients that have made me who I am today. Going back, I wish I wouldn't have, blown all my money before the recession and bought all these things. And, that's easy to say. and then not lose everything and have to move into my grandparents' basement. But then at the same time, the best thing that ever happened to me is that, I went through those struggles. I went through those hard times. And that's what made me be more frugal. That's what made me have the work ethic that I have. That's what made me take the chances that I've taken. So it's kind of one of those funny things where most regrets that you have cause you to take, more chances or be more cautious or, it's like I talk to friends saying, hey, do you regret marrying that girl, or that woman? And it's like, obviously it was hard and, the breakup's not fun and you don't want to go through that. But then going forward, it makes them, be a better dad or a better husband to the next one because they learned what they were doing wrong. So I think to live with regret, is living in the past. I think you should learn from your mistakes, not call them regrets, but call them lessons. And then as you go forward, try not to repeat them, And if you do that, then it's not a regret. It was just a lesson. And so I really don't have those kind of regrets. Biggest successes for me are obviously when I sold my first businesses after I had lost everything. In 2017, I sold, half of my 3 main businesses and started traveling the world. And for me, that was a huge success. That was a huge moment where I was proud of myself. And all the hard work and all the late nights and all the missing birthday parties and, my kids' first steps and all the things that I had sacrificed had become worth it because now, one of my favorite quotes is, live today like no one else will, so tomorrow you can live like no one else can. And, I tell myself that daily. I'm living a life. I told my wife yesterday, I just got back from a couple weeks in Hawaii. I'm going to Alaska next week. We're going to San Diego before that. We were just up in Bryan Head. I mean, anybody who knows us, every weekend we are doing something. And I'm so grateful for that. It's not bragging, but I told my wife last night, I said, we are so blessed. We are so lucky, quote unquote, we earned it, but at the same time we had some good fortune. And those are my successes, is being able to live like no one else is able to because of the sacrifices we made over the last, over those first 7 or 8 years. So biggest success is being a good dad, being a good husband. I think I do pretty well at that. Obviously I'm not perfect, but those are way bigger for me than financial successes. But traveling, time with family, and this, wonderful life that I get to live is my success. Okay, next question. What did your childhood look like? Had a great childhood. The following question I'm reading ahead, it says, how hard was it not having your dad around growing up? So I don't know that I've gotten into this actually on the podcast, but my real dad, Rick, who I'm named after, passed away when my mom was pregnant with me. She was 5 months pregnant with me, and he died of a freak. He got a sinus infection, and it happened to abscess into an aneurysm, and he passed away just within a few days of that happening. And my mom was left a widow with 2 kids and a baby on the way, and that was her high school sweetheart. They'd been together he was 27 when he passed away. So, I mean, they've been together a decade or so, if not a little bit longer. And, I unfortunately, I never got to meet him, unfortunately, but fortunately I never had to go through, the stories that I hear of that time. My mom says she probably would have taken her life if she didn't have children. She was just absolutely devastated. She would tell me that she would go into the bathroom and stick a washcloth in her mouth and just scream, and so that the other, the little kids wouldn't hear her, and she remembers watching the clock on the wall changing by the minute, thinking I've got to get through this minute and this minute and this minute, not hours or days or months. She was trying to get through the minutes. So I can't imagine what that was for her, but, thankfully I was sheltered from that. I was young enough to where obviously I don't have the memories. And then she met my father now, Kendall, who's been on the podcast. You can go back a few episodes and listen to him, but he's my stepdad, but he's all I've ever known. They got married when I was 3 or 4, and he's been absolute beautiful stepdad. I always commend people who can jump into, who marry a woman who has kids. That's not an easy thing to do. I don't know if I could do it, and I hope I could. But for him to jump in with a widow that has 3 children and he had 2 of his own and take on that responsibility instantly, 3 more mouths to feed, 3 different personalities, the responsibility, the stress, those are my heroes. These men and women who jump in and become good mothers and fathers for people who, unfortunately didn't have that opportunity, and lost somebody or divorce, whatever it may be. And these people that step in. So, how hard was it to not have your dad growing up around? I did have my dad growing, I didn't have my real dad. And I'm hoping I can maybe meet him someday, if that works out. But having Kendall around that's all I ever knew. And he was a beautiful dad. He is a beautiful dad. We just actually spent a week in Hawaii 2 weeks ago. And I never knew any difference. I never felt like I didn't have a dad at all. It just felt like he was my dad and everything was beautiful and good. So, my childhood was amazing. We were poor, didn't have a lot of money. But that was okay. I had a bike and I had a backyard and a trampoline, and that's all I needed. We didn't go on trips very much. We went camping and some things like that to the lake and whatnot. But, that's what people think is, including me. I've taken my kids all over the world. That's for me. That's not for my kids. Everybody always says, why are you taking your young kids? They're never going to remember it. And it's like, hello, I just wanted to take a quick break from our conversation podcast that we are just listening to and talk to you about a few things that we have going on right now with M42 Adventures. As you know, we're an experienced company. We're trying to get people out there to enjoy the outside, outdoors, all different aspects of it. And we just wanted to go over some things that we have in the docket and on the schedule. As you know, we had some New Harmony events here in Utah, some private retreats, to come out here and experience a lot of things we're doing with M42. And those are sold out. We had 2 dates in August and September, and those are sold out. So those are gone, but we're going to be announcing some more for April of next year, May of next year. We're working on the schedule for next year. Hawaii, we just got done with a couple of events in Hawaii. Took out some people out there to hunt axis deer with bows, and those sold out within 30 minutes of announcing them. And we're going to be announcing some more of those for next year as well. So if you want to come out to Hawaii with some like-minded individuals and hunt axis deer with a bow, then stay tuned, sign up for the newsletter, follow along on our social media. I head to Alaska next week on an event that's sold out as well with 8 individuals, and we are going to go fish the rivers of Alaska, fly in float planes, do hiking, all types of fishing. I've been going up there for 12 summers and absolutely love it. It is an absolute passion of mine, and I'm excited to share that with these individuals that are coming with me next week. And then Africa, we still have Africa available. So we have 2 Africa dates coming up quick here in August. I actually just booked my flights for me and my family. There's 5 of us, my wife and 3 kids, and my parents, my 2 parents, my mom and dad are coming out. So 2 dates available still, August 5th to the 11th, which Ryan Mickler will be the headliner for that week, and then August 11th to the 17th, where I will be the headliner. And there's a lot going on there. We're going to have a helicopter ride. We're going to give back and do some humanitarian stuff at an orphanage, photo safari, and then there's some hunting packages. You can come as a hunter or non-hunter. You can bring kids. These are some of the questions we've been asked. We've sold 22 spots so far, so they are filling up. We only have a handful left for each week, but if you'd like to come out, reach out to us, and we'd love to have you. So Origin is actually going to be a sponsor of that, and they're sending us some camo, and we're going to have a photographer out there getting a lot of footage and different things. So excited for that and can't wait to get out there. I just had a gentleman who went with his family of, I think, 18 people for 2 weeks. He was there for 2 weeks, and he said it was the absolute trip of a lifetime. He's an older gentleman, and he said it was the coolest trip he has done in his life. And his wife, who was telling me she did not want to go, she didn't want to do the long flight, she was hesitant, started getting emotional and actually crying when she told me how much she loved it and how much it changed her, and that it is absolutely a beautiful experience. So I cannot wait. I booked my flights 2 days ago and taking my entire family. So if you want to come out, enjoy Africa, we got 2 hunts this year, 2 experiences this year. And then we're going to be announcing more here in the next month or so for next year if you want to get in on that. But anyway, yeah, that's what we got going on with M42. Just wanted to give you some updates. Let's get back to this conversation. Thank you for listening. That's not what I'm doing this for. I'm doing it because I will remember it. I will remember my son skipping rocks in the Mediterranean Sea. I'll remember my son catching a fish in, New Zealand. So even though they may be too young to have those memories, I will always have them. And, going back to, you don't have to have, we just went up to Bryan Head this weekend and went and walked around a pond and tried our best fishing and caught one. My son caught his first fish ever and went to the park and sit by a fire, played catch, just got off the screens and basically went camping. And my kids that's where they're happiest, so you don't have to take your kids to Rome or to New Zealand. It's like you just, so I didn't ever really feel poor growing up, and I had a beautiful childhood. I wouldn't trade it. We moved to Vegas from 8 to 14, which I hated Las Vegas. I just did not like that town. It's fine to go visit now as I get older, but I didn't want to, I didn't like being raised there. It was just not like Utah where I was from. And so that was a little tough, but great childhood, can't complain, great parents. And so all those things were good. Okay, let's see. Hardest thing you've ever had to do in business. That's a pretty easy one. In the recession, so we had a few hundred employees in Mexico with our business. And when things started falling apart, we ended up having to move to Utah, just downsizing. There was no, reason to have all the equipment and employees. And I wanted to get back home. And so we moved back to Utah, and I went from about 17 employees down to 2 during the recession over the course of about a year and a half. And at one point I had to fire my mom. So my mom had worked with me for 4 or 5 years. She was my secretary and office manager, and had to go in and fire her because just there was no sales. And so that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And she took it well. She understood. She hugged me, cried, says, "I'm sorry you're going through this. We'll be fine. Don't worry." And she went and got a job, with the school district. So, but that was pretty tough to have to let your mom go. Was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Next question. So if you had $1,000 to your name and couldn't save it, what would you do with it? That's hard. So I have to spend it. I couldn't save it. I know this isn't it says I can't save it, but I would save it. And I would save it till it grew a little bit. What I would do with it when I first started getting my money back, and it was not much. So we lost everything again. We lost our vehicles. We lost our house. We had to move into my grandparents' basement. I lost my income for 18 months, still working every day. I lost my income, and I started, rat holing. I was afraid of banks and stuff because they were, repossessing my cars and things like that. I started hiding money under my mattress, and I remember getting like $1,000, and I started talking to people and just saying, "Hey, I've got $1,000 cash. I don't know what to do with it. It's not enough to buy a house. It's not enough to really buy any stocks with." And I had people come to me that were like, "Hey man, I need to borrow $500. I need to make a car payment." And I'd charge them $600. I'd charge them $100 interest. I had one, I bought a forklift I think I bought it for $1,200 in the recession, cash. Ended up fixing it. Had a guy fix it. I'm not mechanically inclined. Had a guy fix it for like $150 and sold it for $2,200. Remember, I made about $1,000 profit. So I did a lot of deals like that. I helped a guy get some Sea-Doos, some jet skis. I got up to $3,000 and he needed $3,000. So he went and bought the jet skis. I took the jet skis and the title, put them in my garage, in my grandparents' garage. And he ended up paying me $3,500 total over 90 days. So I made $500, interest over 90 days. I did probably, I don't even know, 50 or 60 deals like that. It was actually pretty shocking to me where, how many Americans, including myself at a period, were just barely scraping by, and you just needed an extra $100 for gas, or something like that. And so I remember buying a guy a battery. He didn't have a battery for his car, and I says, "I'll buy your battery, $100, and you pay me back $125 when you get paid on payday." And it doesn't sound like a lot, but at the time when I wasn't making an income and I was so broke, and you do, I don't even know, just probably maybe even 100 of these deals. I mean, I did it for years, 2 or 3 years, and I grew that from $1,000, and I grew it up to $40,000-$50,000 over a few years of just side hustling, making these little tiny deals that, now I look back on and I kind of laugh, but at the time it was just survival. And then I got into bigger deals, then I started buying land. It was what I started buying lots and buying them for, 28,000 cash, selling them for 45,000. But I think people don't give credit to being able to do smaller deals. There's people out there who, if they know that you have $1,000 or $2,000 cash willing to loan it out, then they'll come out of the woodworks and you can do some deals. I had a guy call me the other day. A family member ran into me at the gym, and he's moving to Florida, and he asked me if he could borrow $5,000 and, and give me some jet skis as collateral, because he was moving to Florida and didn't have the cash. I ended up not doing the deal because it's family, and I'm very careful with family and friends on any kind of business deals. And I just told him I didn't want to do that with family and get into a bad situation and repossess my family members, jet skis. So I actually didn't do that deal, but I still have people to this day call me, and I still do I still do these deals, when it comes around. So that's what I would do if I had the $1,000. I would use it to parlay it into some deals of helping people and helping, and then earning interest. So that's what I would do. Top investment I have, and that's a good one. My businesses, I actually have a rental property. So I had 8 rental properties at one point. I sold all of them. They were little 1-bedroom condos. I sold all 8 of them and rolled that over into a 40-acre property out by Zion National Park. That's renting out right now on Airbnb. It's called Elevation 40 Zion. If you are on Instagram, it's insane. It's insane, the property. Anybody that goes there, it's just absolutely breathtaking. I wasn't even looking for property when I bought it. It was during COVID, and I just happened to run out there with a buddy, and I have to own this. That's and it's renting. It's just renting like crazy, thankfully, and at a very high rate, nightly rate. And so that's a very good investment. But bigger than that is my businesses. I have, half a dozen businesses that do more than that. And so my top investment would be my companies, probably. It's a close one, because that one I don't deal with. I don't have to mess with it. And I don't do a lot with my businesses, but at the same time, I do nothing with my cabin. It's ran by a property manager, and I don't really even have to think about it. But yeah, businesses / real estate, I know it's kind of broad, but those are the ones that are my best investments. I have other smaller investments and, loans out to people and different things. I have probably 15 or 20 investments out there, but those are my top couple, or my construction businesses that I still own, 38% of, and then my rental property. What's your favorite investment? So my cabin would be my favorite investment. That's hard again, because I love the companies. I've been offered to be bought out of them completely, and I just can't let go. And it's not because it's a legacy or anything like that, but I just love the people. Everybody that is, my partners that I've sold to, there's 5 of them, I believe now, that all have ownership, and I love them. They're my friends. They're just good people, and I love seeing them follow in my footsteps and start making a little bit money, making a little bit better money, start getting some dividends from the companies. And then they're on their, one of them just bought a lot up in the mountains and is building a cabin. The other one's looking for some rental properties, so I get a lot of joy out of that. The money, when you don't have any, you got to have money. That's just life. And so I grinded so hard trying to make the money. And now that I have it, within reason, I mean, obviously, you can, it's all relative, but now that I have what I want and my monthly passive income is greater by far than what I spend, the next joy is the people around me and the relationship. So the cabin's cool. It's fun. It's awesome. We love the cabin. And, but I don't know, again, it's probably a tie. Those are both different reasons, but, let's see. Okay. So the next question, at what moment did you realize you beat the rat race? So, again, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he talks about the rat race, where we're all in it. We're trying to, I always use the analogy that you're trying to keep your head above water. And I was there where I was drowning. I was a foot under the water and just couldn't even see the light. But the rat race is basically, where you're just trying to survive. And I've been there for years and years. And I remember meeting with a mentor of mine, and I encourage everybody to get a mentor. And I met with a mentor of mine named Bill. And I says, hey, I want to retire and travel the world. And I remember he kind of laughed at me. I was 30, probably 32 at the time, broke. My company was just struggling. I had 4 or 5 employees. I would hired a couple people back, but still just not in a good situation at all. And I says, how do you know when you're ready to retire? And, he basically said when your stable passive income is higher than your bills. And I remember, and he says that, or having $5 million cash is what he said. So this was 12 years ago. So 5 million maybe doesn't go as far, but 5 million cash you can do quite a bit with. But he said $5 million cash, or your passive income, stable passive income, is higher than your bills. And so I set a number at $10,000 a month, which my bills were a lot lower than that at the time, but I figured that I wanted enough to where I wasn't stressed out about every dollar. And so I set a number at $10,000 a month. And when I hit $10,000 a month in passive income, I retired. And that's what I did. So it took me from I was 32 years old. It took me 5 years to 37. I was 36 and a half. And it was a combination of, started buying condos. So I got up to 8 condos, and I got them paid off, which they were netting about $1,000 a month. I was making about $1,800, and I spent about $800 in taxes and maintenance and, Airbnb fees, whatnot. So I was netting about $1,000 per condo. So I was at 8,000. And then I sold my business, got a chunk of cash. I sold 20%, got a pretty good chunk of change in the bank at that point. And then I owner financed that as well. Some of that buyout. So I was getting money from that as well. So that's how I got to my $10,000 number. And that's when I retired, and I think that shocked a lot of people. I've heard that a lot from people who know my story, and they say, a lot of people can't stop. And it was hard for me, more is a scary thing. When you're living for more and you want more, I ask a lot of people nowadays when I financially coach them, how much money do you want? And when they say more, I say that doesn't work. What's the number? And then when you get to that number, we have to stay in the confines of that number. A lot of people, most people, including myself, I remember thinking when I first started working, if I could make $5,000 a month, I'm going to be rich. And then I get to $5,000 and I buy a bigger house and I buy a nicer motorcycle and I buy a bigger truck, and now I need $7,000. And then I, make $7,000 and I want a nicer watch and I want to go on more vacations. Now I need $10,000. And so that's what gets scary You just have to make sure that if, what you want, what your goal is, and you have to define your goal. Mine was long-term travel with my family. I had it defined. I had what that would cost me, which at that time, 10 years ago, was about $8,000 a month. I didn't have hardly any bills here at home. And so $8,000 a month was my number to be able to go travel and not be stressed. And so when I got to 10, I had a couple $1,000 buffer. And then I stayed in those confines. I didn't go buy a bigger house. I didn't go buy a bigger truck because I wanted to travel. And so, that's where I think for you to leave the rat race, you have to set your goals, define them exactly, dollar-wise. If it's a Lamborghini, that's fine. I don't care what your goals are. It doesn't matter to me. If you want a jet, then set that goal. You need 20 million bucks. And then you got to go earn it. And you got to figure out how to, trade your time or your, creativity to earn that money. And so mine was 10 grand. And that's when I realized that I was there and I left. And I think that surprised a lot of people. I remember talking to my friends and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm going to travel. And they're like, for how long? I'm like, 2 or 3 years, for sure. And they couldn't believe it. They're like, well, you could make more money. We're in a great economy and there's a lot of opportunity. And I'm like, I have enough. And they could not believe that statement. What's enough? What does that even mean? And I explained to them I had enough stable passive income that I didn't need to work anymore. And that's, anybody who follows me knows that my mantra is one life, so live. And it's like, I don't want to wake up 20 more years with more millions of dollars in my bank account and lose all this time. I would not trade the 7 years of travel with my family for anything. If you came and said, hey, we'll wipe away the last 7 years and give you 10 million bucks, it's like, no, I'm good. Because I can't go back to those times where my little boys were, we had stages of our travel that were beautiful, where we went to zoos and we went to parks and we, to go traveling with my kids now, it's different. They're into girls and they're into, video games. So that chapter of travel for 7 years when my kids were 2 and 5 and now they're 9 and 12 and my youngest is 3 was a beautiful chapter of travel. People say, how did you travel with kids? That sounds miserable. And it's like, man, how did you not travel with kids? You go to a bar, you go to a club, you go sit on the beach. That's fun. I understand all that. And that's great. I'm not trying to belittle anything, but there's a lot of value and a lot of depth to going to 40, 50 zoos around the world, which we've been to, and watching your kids light up when they see all these animals. And, we go to the beach and play on the tide pools, and I love travel with kids. So, enough, defining what is enough. When it says at what moment did you realize you beat the rat race? It was a mathematical problem for me. And I had it figured out. And I did not change the math. If I would have went and bought a bigger house, my 10,000 would have went to 12,000, and that would have taken me a couple more, another year, whatever, to earn that passive income. And I didn't want that. So we stayed in the same small house, and we're in it today. It's a 1,200 square foot home that my wife's parents own that we rent. And I could go buy a big house and, no problem at all. But I would rather have the freedom of travel and not having this, huge house that I've got to clean and take care of and manage while I'm trying to be in Australia or Africa or Alaska, wherever I may be. I'd rather have a small home that doesn't cost a lot in utilities and care and travel the world. And that's still how I live. So, that's it. When you have to buy something expensive, what is your process to do so? That's kind of vague. Expensive. I don't buy expensive stuff anymore. I don't buy, and I should say, when I hear expensive, I think of like, material things, flashy material things. And that may not be how this person meant it. So I'll answer it 2 ways. But when I buy something expensive, I try to, pay cash for it if I can. My property out there, I paid most of it in cash. Debt scares me and I don't like having debt. So that is how whenever I buy something expensive, I try to pay for it and not take out a loan and pay interest. My mentor also said one thing to me that has always stuck with me is there's two types of people in the world. One who pays interest and one who charges interest. Be the latter. And I've always thought about that. Most of the money that I've made in my life has been through owner financing, loans, deals like that. I've made tons of money from that. And that's why all the banks and all these credit card companies are trying to get you to borrow their money, is because they hook you to a ball and chain and they try to, they're charging you interest. There's nothing against it. That's why I do it. It's not unethical. Some of the rates that they charge are unethical. I charge like 6-7%. They're charging 25-30. That is crazy. But if you signed your name for the credit card and you agreed to that before, then that's your fault. You hear a lot of people saying, oh, I've got this credit card debt and it's not fair. And it's like, did you sign your name? Yes, I did. Well, then that is your fault. And you need to read the contract better. You need to understand the terms better. And I think we live in a society. I remember the first couple condos I bought, I got them to owner finance. I put 20% down and got the owner to finance. And like the fourth or fifth condo that I bought, I paid cash for. And I remember taking the check to the guy, and it was like $125,000. They weren't real expensive at the time. And I handed him that check of $125,000, and it was 100 times harder to hand him that check of $125,000 and watch it go right out of my account than it was to give him 20% and make a payment for, the next couple of years until I could pay it off. There's something in us that we've been conditioned, or at least me personally, that I was conditioned that debt was okay. And to lose $1,000 a month, or to spend $1,000 a month, was a lot easier than spending $100,000, at one time. And I think that's what's kind of wrong with our society, is I went and bought a Dodge truck and I paid $50,000 for it, and my payment was like $800 a month. I didn't think anything about it. I'm like, oh, $800, I can afford that, barely, but I can afford that, sign my name and walk away. It's like, I'm spending $50,000. That's what you spent. More than that, because the interest and stuff on that, it's going to be a $70,000-$80,000 truck if you go for the full term. But we've been taught that that's okay. That's better. That's what you have to do. I remember my dad, bless his heart, he says, you're always going to have a car payment. You're always going to have a house payment. That's life. And I don't, and I haven't for a decade. I started out with my condos and I just went to work and I paid them off, I paid all of them off within a few years. And like I said, I got to 8 of them with no payment. So I don't agree with the fact that you just have to have this big, car payment. If you buy an older car and you spend $3 or $4,000 and drive that, and you don't have a payment, and you sacrifice and you keep working and saving and saving and saving and saving, and you start making investments, then that money from the investments can pay for all the other things that you want. And that's how I live today. So, when you have time, Ricky's showing me the time on the watch. When you have to buy something expensive, what is your process? I try to really only buy assets. If I'm buying something very expensive, I really try to buy stuff that's going to make me money, businesses, real estate, things like that. But if it's something expensive, and, like I bought a Jeep Gladiator here the last couple of years, it was a tax write-off, for my cabin, for my business. So I justified it that way, and then I paid, cash for it. So I try to get away from the expensive stuff and the flashy stuff. I'm over that completely. Obviously I like to look nice and have some, I don't want to look like a vagrant, but at the same time, I'm like, right now I'm wearing shoes off Amazon. They were $20. I'm wearing pants off Amazon that were $20. Got my, M42 t-shirt on, my M42 hat. I've got literally $100 worth of stuff on me at the most right now. And that's how I dress every day, right? Ricky knows. Yeah, I wear the same shirt for 3 days. I don't really care. It's like, I look at my dad, Kendall, who's, worth millions. And he came in here to do a podcast, and he's got old Wranglers on, right? Boots that have been worn because he's a cowboy. And, there's a country song by Montgomery Gentry that says, you see that old farmer on the porch, he could buy your fancy car with $100 bills. And I love that, and that's kind of how I live now is, my value is in trips and vacations and time with family and not in material things that I just don't have a desire for that anymore. I don't, once you lose everything and you're stripped of it and you're sitting in the basement alone with your wife and kids and you have nothing, you see what matters. And it's not the big truck that the repo company came and took away. It's not the, $40,000 motorcycle that they came and loaded up and took away, or the big house that they took the keys to. It's your wife, your kids, memories, and security, food, shelter. That's what matters to me. And I don't get into, too much of that kind of crazy stuff. So anyway, that was our first Ask Rick Anything, Ask Me Anything. Hopefully you got some value out of that. We didn't get to all the questions. I've still got, I only got to one of the 3 pages. So we'll save these questions and then add to it. And we'll try to do this every few weeks. Hopefully you got some value out of this. If you did, and you have a question that you'd like to ask me on finance, real estate, traveling, outdoor, adventures, anything like that, then please DM us on Instagram. We're on all the social media, M42 Adventures. You can chat us on our website. And thank you for listening. Appreciate you, taking the time to listen to this. We're here trying to just help people out, get them outside, get them on adventures. And obviously you can see from a lot of these questions, a lot of it's about how we're living and how we're, how we've gotten here. And I'm happy to help anybody I can get here to where we're at. And we're going to continue to grow, and we're going to continue to thrive. So appreciate all of you. Yeah, appreciate your time. Appreciate you listening, and stay tuned for the next one. We got an amazing guest next week. It's going to be a story time with special guest Michael Scrogan from the Hunting Stories podcast. And we've got some funny stuff on there. So tune in every Friday. We're going to release an episode, and we got some amazing guests lined up we're recording with the next few days. And thank you. Appreciate it. Bye.